The sun had set on the barren planet, casting long shadows across the dry landscape. A faint wind stirred the dust, and the distant cry of a creature echoed through the empty plains. It was a silent, desolate place, forgotten by most in the galaxy. The only sign of life here was a small group of humans, gathered near the entrance of a makeshift research station. They had come here to study the planet, but nothing could have prepared them for what was about to happen. The humans had been on this planet for a week, exploring and recording the strange flora and fauna, when they first noticed something unusual. It started with a whisper of movement at the edge of their camp. At first, it was just the wind, or so they thought. But then, it happened again, this time closer. A shadow flickered across the ground, and the hairs on the back of Sergeant Miller's neck stood up. He turned sharply, eyes scanning the horizon, but saw nothing. He wasn't alone. Lieutenant Hawk, the team's leader, stood nearby, watching the same spot. "Did you see that?" Miller asked in a low voice, his hand instinctively going to the rifle slung across his back. "I saw it," Hawk replied. Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed the concern she was trying to hide. She motioned for the team to stay alert. The strange thing was, they weren't alone on this planet. There were signs of activity everywhere. Footprints, broken branches, even scratches on rocks that could only have been made by something large and powerful. But there was no trace of the creatures that left them. As the night wore on, the team remained vigilant. No one spoke much, each member of the crew lost in their thoughts. They had all been trained for dangerous situations, but this was something different. The planet felt alive in a way that made their skin crawl, and they all knew something was watching them. Then, just as the moon rose high in the sky, it happened. A loud, low growl echoed across the landscape. The sound was deep and powerful, reverberating in the bones of every human present. It was the sound of something massive, something predatory. The team froze, their hearts pounding. A few of the more experienced members pulled their weapons from their holsters, but Hawk raised a hand, signaling them to hold. The growl was followed by a soft rustling sound, and from the darkness of the forest beyond their camp, a figure appeared. At first, it was just a silhouette, but as it drew closer, the team could make out the details. It was tall, much taller than any human, and covered in dark fur. Its shape was vaguely humanoid, but there was no mistaking the predator's sleek, muscular build. For a moment, the humans didn't move. They just watched, eyes wide, hearts racing. This was a creature unlike anything they had seen before, and it was approaching them without hesitation. But the strangest part, it didn't seem hostile. "Stay calm," Hawk whispered. "No sudden movements." The creature approached the camp slowly, its eyes glowing a faint amber in the moonlight. It had an almost regal air about it, like it knew that it was the dominant force in this environment. The humans stood frozen, unsure of what to do. This was no ordinary animal, they could tell that much. Then, to their shock, the creature made a noise. It was not a growl or a roar, but a low, soft hum. It was almost as if the creature was trying to communicate. The team exchanged uncertain glances. They had never encountered an alien species capable of communication before, let alone one that approached them so calmly. Was this a warning, a threat, or something else entirely? As the creature got closer, something else caught their attention. It wasn't alone. More shapes appeared from the darkness, larger than life, shadowy figures moving silently among the trees. The humans were surrounded. But instead of attacking, the creatures simply observed them, their glowing eyes watching from every angle. There was no aggression in their posture, no sign that they were preparing to strike. They were just watching. "Don't move," Hawk said again, her voice a little sharper this time. A chilling silence fell over the camp as the humans stood stock still, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Then one of the creatures, the largest of the group, took a step forward, lowering its head to the ground. It nudged something in the dirt, a small bundle wrapped in something soft and fur-like. The humans took a cautious step forward, their curiosity growing despite the danger they knew was present. As they approached, they saw what the creature had uncovered: a small, defenseless baby predator. It was curled up tightly in a protective ball, its tiny eyes closed in peaceful slumber. The largest predator, the one that had approached them first, stood protectively over the baby, but its posture was relaxed now. The humans, confused and mesmerized, exchanged looks. They had expected to see a battle, to see predators that would hunt them down and tear them apart. But instead, the creatures had brought their young. They were being protective. There was an unspoken bond between these creatures and their offspring. The humans could feel it. The predators weren't here to fight. They were here to protect their young. And for some reason, they had come to trust the humans with that responsibility. The team looked at each other, uncertain of what to do. The world had just shifted beneath their feet, and nothing would ever be the same again. Look, why did these deadly creatures trust humans with their young? What secret did this planet hold that would change everything the humans thought they knew? The night seemed to stretch on endlessly as the humans stood frozen in place, unsure of what to make of the strange turn of events. The large predators circled around them, their amber eyes gleaming in the dim moonlight. But despite the tense atmosphere, no one made a move to attack. Instead, the creatures remained in place, silently observing their visitors from all sides. Hawk, the team's leader, was the first to break the silence. Her voice was soft, yet steady. "Stay calm. No sudden movements. We don't know what they want yet." Her team nodded, though their hearts were pounding in their chests. What could these creatures possibly want with them? And more importantly, why had they brought their young into the midst of such a dangerous situation? The baby predator, still nestled in its protective cocoon, shifted slightly, making the soft, whimpering sound. The large creature closest to it, presumably its mother, gently nudged the small bundle with its snout, as if reassuring it. The humans could see the care and affection in the creature's movements, an unexpected tenderness that seemed to contradict the deadly reputation these predators held. "We need to think this through," Lieutenant Turner said, his voice barely above a whisper. "These creatures brought their young to us. That's not something you do if you're planning on hunting someone." Hawk agreed, her brow furrowed in thought. There was no mistaking it. The creatures were showing them something. But what? The predators didn't act like typical animals. They weren't wild beasts seeking prey. There was a strange intelligence in their actions, a clear understanding of the humans' presence, and more importantly, their purpose. They had come here for something, and Hawk was determined to find out what. Without a word, she took a cautious step forward. The other humans followed suit, carefully matching her pace. The creatures didn't move to stop them. Instead, they continued to watch silently, their glowing eyes locked on the humans' every move. Hawk kneeled down slowly, keeping her hands visible to avoid startling the creatures. She focused on the small baby predator, who had finally opened its eyes. The creature's eyes, although filled with fear and uncertainty, also held something else, something deeper: curiosity. The mother predator, still standing protectively over its young, watched closely. But instead of attacking or showing any aggression, the creature took a step back, allowing Hawk to approach the infant. She could feel the tension in the air, but there was no hostility. Only patience. Taking a deep breath, Hawk reached out, slowly and carefully, to touch the baby predator's soft fur. The small creature flinched at first, but then it relaxed under her touch. Something changed in that moment. A quiet understanding passed between the human and the predator's young. It wasn't just a touch, it was a bond, a connection that couldn't be easily explained. The humans were witnessing something remarkable. For creatures so fierce and primal, there was an unexpected level of trust being placed in them. The deadly predators, often considered a threat to all who crossed their paths, were showing them an act of vulnerability. "Lieutenant," Turner whispered, his voice tinged with awe, "I think they're trusting us." The words hung heavy in the air as the team absorbed the gravity of the situation. Trust, something that should never be given lightly, especially when dealing with creatures known for their terrifying power. And yet, here they were, standing in the presence of these predators, and they had been given a gift, an opportunity to prove themselves worthy of this trust. "We need to respect this," Hawk murmured, pulling back her hand. She straightened, keeping her eyes on the creatures. "We're not here to hurt them. Let's make sure we show them the same respect." As she spoke, the team fell into a silent agreement. They didn't understand the reasons behind the predators' actions, but they knew one thing for certain. This moment wasn't just a chance encounter. It was an invitation, a challenge. The baby predator, now seemingly calm and content, rested peacefully in its mother's care. And as the other creatures stepped back, one by one, they made room for the humans to observe and learn. The camp was still. The only sound was the wind rustling through the tall grasses and the soft, rhythmic breathing of the creatures. The humans knew they were on the edge of something far greater than they could comprehend, a discovery that would change everything they knew about these predators, about themselves, and about the galaxy they thought they understood. They weren't just witnesses to an event. They were part of it. And that realization sent a ripple of awe and wonder through them all. The night passed quietly, with the humans and the predators sharing an uneasy truce. Despite the overwhelming tension in the air, no one moved aggressively. The predators kept their distance, watching the humans with silent intensity, while the humans remained cautious, still unsure of what the predators expected from them. Hawk lay awake for hours, staring at the flickering light of the campfire. The vastness of the situation hung over her like a storm cloud. These creatures, deadly and wild, had placed an extraordinary amount of trust in them, and that trust felt both like a gift and a burden. They had to be careful. One wrong move could undo everything. As dawn's first light crept over the horizon, the predators began to stir. The leader of the group, a massive, heavily scared creature, stepped forward. Its eyes locked on Hawk. She held its gaze, her heart pounding. There was something in the creature's posture that told her this was not a typical morning. This was something new. Without a word, the creature turned and motioned for the humans to follow. The others, including the lieutenant and the rest of the team, rose to their feet, silently acknowledging the unspoken command. Their weapons were still holstered, a gesture of peace. The predators hadn't shown any signs of aggression, but the humans knew the situation could change in an instant. The team moved cautiously through the dense forest, the predators leading the way. As they traveled deeper into the wilderness, the trees grew thicker, and the underbrush more tangled. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and moss, a far cry from the sterile corridors of the ship they had once called home. This was wild, untamed land, home to creatures that had long survived without human interference. After several hours of walking, they reached a clearing. At the center was a massive structure, unlike anything they had ever seen before. It was an ancient ruin, weathered by time, yet still towering and imposing. The design was unlike anything in human records, a hybrid of natural and artificial, the walls seemingly grown from the very stone of the planet itself. The predators halted at the entrance to the structure. Hawk couldn't help but marvel at the scene before her. The structure was old, older than anything she had ever encountered, and yet it held a strange ancient power. One of the predators, the one that had been closest to the baby, approached the entrance and stood guard, its fierce eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of danger. The others turned to the humans. Hawk stepped forward, her mind racing. "What is this place?" she asked, her voice low, but full of curiosity. The predator nearest her made a low growl, not threatening, but enough to signal the importance of the place. The silence was overwhelming, the kind that made Hawk's skin crawl. It wasn't just a structure. It was a place of significance. "Stay alert," Lieutenant Turner whispered, his hand on his weapon. "We don't know what's inside." The humans nodded, their senses heightened as they followed the predators into the ancient ruin. The interior was dark. the air cool and musty, filled with the scent of decay. Yet, as their eyes adjusted to the dim light, they saw faint carvings on the walls, symbols they couldn't recognize but were certain held meaning. The predators moved with purpose, leading them deeper into the structure, as though they were on a path they had traveled before. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a loud rumble that seemed to come from deep within the ruin. The ground shook beneath their feet, and the team braced themselves for impact, eyes wide with fear. The predators didn't flinch, their bodies tense but unmoving. Then, from the shadows emerged another figure, a massive, armored creature, unlike any they had seen before. Its eyes were cold, calculating, and its body was covered in jagged plates, a terrifying sight. The predators surrounding Hawk and her team stepped forward, forming a protective circle around them. There was no hesitation in their movements. These creatures were ready to fight, to defend their visitors at all costs. "Who's this?" Lieutenant Turner asked, his voice a mix of fear and awe. Hawk didn't answer. She was too focused on the towering figure now emerging from the darkness. It was clear that this was no ordinary predator. It was something else entirely. A leader, a warrior, perhaps even a king. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut through. The humans stood still, unsure whether this new figure would attack or join the others in their strange alliance. To their surprise, the massive creature stopped just before them. Its eyes flicked from one human to the next before settling on Hawk. Then, in a voice that seemed to echo within their minds, it spoke. "You have earned our trust, but you must prove your worth." The words were simple but carried with them a weight the humans couldn't ignore. They had entered a world they didn't understand, and now they would have to face whatever trial awaited them. Hawk took a deep breath, her heart racing. "What do you want from us?" The creature stepped forward, its gaze never leaving her. "Survive." And just like that, the trial had begun. The silence in the chamber was deafening, save for the low hum of the air filtering through the cracks in the ancient walls. The massive armored predator stood before them, its cold, calculating eyes fixed on Hawk. Her heart pounded in her chest, the weight of the creature's words still hanging heavily in the air. Survive. What did it mean? Was it a test of physical endurance, or something more? The tension in the room grew thicker by the second, and the humans instinctively formed a loose circle, scanning their surroundings, prepared for anything. Hawk's mind raced. They had just been thrown into an alien world, trusted by beings that were both allies and predators in the same breath. But now, their trust would be tested. How would they prove their worth to these creatures? Was this test a show of survival skills, or something deeper, something that stretched the very limits of their understanding? The enormous creature's eyes flicked to the side, motioning for the others to step back. The predators, including the one who had initially shown them kindness, all retreated, creating an open space in the middle of the ancient hall. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed once more inside the humans' minds. "Only by facing the trial can you prove your strength, fight for your survival, and earn the right to protect what you hold dear." Hawk could feel the weight of the words. The challenge was now clear. This wasn't a simple test of survival. It was a trial of their very character. The predators would push them to their limits, testing not only their physical strength but their ability to think, adapt, and overcome. Before Hawk could fully process the situation, the walls around them began to shift. The ground trembled beneath their feet as massive doors creaked open on either side of the chamber. A low growl echoed from within, and out from the shadows, figures began to emerge. The predators were not alone. The first creature stepped forward, massive, terrifying, and covered in armor-like scales. It moved with the grace of a predator, each step calculated, its eyes glowing with an unearthly light. The other creatures followed suit, their growls reverberating in the chamber. This was no ordinary test. They were about to face some of the deadliest creatures the galaxy had ever known. Hawk clenched her fists, trying to remain calm. Her mind raced through possible strategies. The team was outnumbered, But they had one advantage. The humans had faced threats before. They were survivors. She turned to Lieutenant Turner, who met her gaze with a firm nod. They knew what had to be done. The rest of the team followed suit, forming ranks, their weapons ready but their minds clear. Suddenly, the armored creature's voice boomed inside their heads again. Your test is simple. Survive this trial, and you will prove yourselves worthy. Fail, and you will join the ranks of those who never understood us. The humans took a collective breath, bracing for the onslaught that was about to come. The creatures surrounding them began to circle, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. Hawk could see the glint of weapons in their hands, their muscles tense as they prepared to strike. Without warning, the first creature lunged forward, its claws slashing through the air with terrifying speed. Hawk's instincts kicked in immediately, and she rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the strike. The predator's claws scraped across the stone floor, leaving deep gouges in the surface. The humans scattered, each of them reacting in their own way. Some used their weapons, while others relied on their agility to evade the attackers. But the predators weren't just testing their ability to fight. They were testing their ability to think on their feet, to adapt to a constantly changing environment. The chamber seemed to come alive with movement. The sound of growling, clashing metal, and the rapid pounding of feet echoed throughout. Every human was pushed to the limit, struggling to maintain their focus as the predators attacked with brutal precision. Hawk's eyes darted across the battlefield, looking for an opening, a weakness. She spotted a slight opening in the attack pattern of one of the predators, and with a surge of energy, she dove forward, using a nearby pillar for cover. She pressed herself against the stone, hoping to stay hidden. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the chamber. One of the predators had been knocked down by a well-placed strike from Lieutenant Turner. The battle paused for a moment as the predator rose, unhurt but clearly surprised by the human's resilience. The armored creature that had spoken earlier watched closely, its eyes narrowing in what seemed like approval. It stepped forward, raising its hand to signal the others to halt. The growling subsided, and the remaining predators froze, waiting for its next command. Hawk didn't take her eyes off the massive creature. She could feel the pressure building. The test wasn't just about physical survival. It was about how they reacted, how they fought as a team, and whether they could push through the most harrowing challenges. The armored creature's voice echoed in their minds once more. You have faced the trial with honor, but one last challenge remains. Hawk's heart raced. What more could they possibly face? The walls of the chamber began to shake again, and suddenly, the floor split open. A dark pit appeared in the center of the room, and from it emerged a creature unlike anything they had seen before. It was massive, a blend of organic and mechanical parts, with jagged spines and claws that seemed to glow with an eerie energy. It was the ultimate test. The humans knew that this was their final challenge. They had to face this beast together or risk failing everything. Fight together or fall apart, the armored creature's voice warned. With no other choice, the humans prepared for battle, their hearts set on surviving this last trial. Together, the massive creature loomed over them, its mechanical and organic parts shifting as it growled ominously. It was unlike anything the humans had ever faced, a perfect blend of technology and raw, untamed power. The air around it crackled with energy, and the ground beneath them vibrated as it took its first step forward. Hawk's team, battered but not broken, stood in formation. Their weapons were drawn, their minds sharp, and their resolve stronger than ever. The challenge was clear: defeat this terrifying hybrid of metal and flesh, or face annihilation. The creature's eyes gleamed with an unnatural light, scanning each human one by one. It was calculating, waiting for the right moment to strike. Hawk could feel the tension in the air, every second dragging out like an eternity. The predator's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer than the others, and she felt a chill run down her spine. "Stay focused," Hawk whispered, her voice low and steady. Her words were a reminder to her team. This was their last chance. With a deep, resonating growl, the creature lunged. It moved faster than Hawk had anticipated, faster than anything she'd ever seen. One of her team members, Corporal Dax, barely dodged in time, but the creature's claws grazed his side, tearing through his armor like paper. Dax stumbled, but he didn't fall. He quickly regained his footing, his eyes burning with the same fierce determination that Hawk saw in every member of the team. They would survive. They had to. The creature, however, was relentless. It charged again, this time aiming directly at Hawk. She didn't have time to think. Her instincts took over. She rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the deadly swipe of its claws, which left deep gashes in the stone floor. The team split, trying to flank the beast from all sides. Lieutenant Turner led the charge, his blaster firing rapidly as he darted from cover to cover. Every shot hit, but the creature's thick armored plating absorbed most of the blasts. It was impervious to anything they had thrown at it so far. Hawk, still on the move, shouted to the others, "It's not just physical. There's something else we're missing. Look for weaknesses." She could feel her pulse quicken, but she kept her focus. Her eyes scanned the creature's body, looking for any sign of vulnerability. Then she saw it, a faint, glowing seam along its side, barely noticeable. It was where the organic and mechanical parts met. She wasn't sure how long it would last, but it was the only lead they had. "Dax! Turner! Over here!" Hawk called out, pointing toward the weak spot. She didn't wait for a response, charging toward the creature with all her strength. The creature snarled and turned, its massive claw raised to strike her down. At the last second, Lieutenant Turner threw a flash grenade. The light was blinding, and the creature staggered back, momentarily disoriented. That was their opening. Dax and Turner sprinted toward the creature's side, using the distraction to their advantage. With a coordinated strike, they fired directly at the glowing seam. Sparks flew, and the creature let out a deafening roar of pain. The beast staggered, its glowing eyes dimming for a moment. It had taken a hit, but it wasn't finished yet. The ground beneath their feet trembled as the creature regained its balance, its body reforming and adapting rapidly, as if it could heal itself. Hawk knew they couldn't keep this up for long. The creature was evolving, learning. They had to end it now. "Push forward. We've got one shot at this," Hawk shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. She sprinted forward, diving beneath the creature's massive arm and reaching the seam once more. This time, she had a better angle. With her pulse racing, she grabbed a heavy charge from her pack and wedged it into the gap in the creature's plating. "Now," Hawk yelled, signaling to her team. They didn't hesitate. Together, they fired all at once, hitting the weak spot directly. The charge detonated with an explosive force that rocked the chamber. The creature let out an earth-shattering scream as it collapsed to the ground. Its body twitched and spasmed, the energy from the explosion tearing through its systems. Finally, it stopped moving, its glowing eyes fading to nothingness. The silence that followed was deafening. The battle was over. The humans stood in stunned silence, catching their breath. Their bodies were bruised, bloodied, and battered, but they had won. Against all odds, they had survived. Hawk looked around at her team. Dax was limping. Turner was covered in cuts and bruises, but they were alive. They had faced the deadliest predator they'd ever encountered and emerged victorious. Suddenly, the chamber's massive doors opened once again. The armored creature, the one who had issued the challenge, stepped forward. It looked at the fallen beast, then back at the humans. Its expression was unreadable, but there was something in its gaze, a recognition. The creature's voice echoed in their minds, low and steady. "You have proven yourselves, not just as warriors, but as survivors." Hawk stood tall, despite the exhaustion in her bones. "We're not just survivors. We're humans." The armored creature nodded slowly. "The galaxy will remember you, human. You have earned our respect." And with that, the final trial was over. The humans had shown the galaxy their strength, their unity, and their resilience. But this was only the beginning. The air was thick with the tension of the moment. The humans stood victorious, the last of their enemies lying in ruins before them. Their bodies were bruised, their spirits drained, but they had proven themselves. No one could deny that. However, Hawk couldn't shake the feeling that this was not the end. It couldn't be. Despite their success, there was something else lurking, something far more dangerous than any single battle. The room around them was vast, silent, and imposing, the weight of countless alien eyes watching their every move. The prize they had won might be worth more than they ever imagined, but it had come with a price, and the price had just begun to show its true face. "Everyone, stay alert," Hawk said, her voice steady despite the chaos of her thoughts. "We've made our mark, but this is just the start. Trust me, they will come." She turned to her team, each member showing signs of exhaustion, but none willing to admit it. Dax, his hand clutching his side where a gash still bled, nodded slowly. Turner, ever the optimist, smiled despite the fact that half his face was bruised and swollen. "Do you think they'll come for us?" Dax asked, his voice hoarse from the battle. Hawk took a deep breath and looked around the chamber once more. There was no turning back now. They had disrupted the balance of something far larger than themselves, and they were about to learn just how far-reaching the consequences of their actions would be. "The galaxy doesn't like surprises, and we just gave them a big one," she said. "We've proven ourselves worthy of respect, yes, but we've also made a lot of powerful enemies. They'll come." Her words hung heavy in the air, but just as the team began to contemplate the gravity of her statement, something stirred in the shadows. Hawk's instincts kicked in, her hand immediately going to the grip of her weapon. Something was different about this moment. It felt like a harbinger, like the calm before the storm. The ground rumbled slightly beneath their feet. "They're here," Hawk said quietly. The feeling was unmistakable. The hum of distant ships, the distant roar of engines. And then the walls around them began to shimmer, revealing hidden panels and systems that had remained concealed until now. Hawk had no idea what was happening, but she could feel it in her gut. Whatever was coming, it wasn't just the usual fleet of ships. This was something new, something that had been waiting. The chamber grew colder, the temperature dropping rapidly. She looked over to Turner, who was staring at the now exposed walls, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What are we dealing with?" he muttered. Hawk didn't answer. She couldn't. There was no way to know. But she had a sinking feeling that their victory was going to come with a much steeper cost than they had anticipated. A loud metallic sound echoed through the room. Something far too large and complex to be a simple door or passage. Hawk could hear the whir of advanced machinery and the hiss of airlocks being sealed. Then the first shadow appeared. It was massive, towering over them, its form silhouetted by the faint glow of blue lights as the door opened fully. The figure inside wasn't humanoid, at least, not by any definition the humans were used to. Its limbs were elongated and segmented. And the head. The head was a strange amalgamation of sleek metallic plating and shifting organic matter. Its eyes, however, were the most unnerving part. They were black, yet there was an unmistakable intelligence within them, and it was staring directly at Hawk. "We were wrong," Dax whispered, his voice filled with awe. "This isn't just a trial. It's something far bigger." The figure stepped into the room, its movements slow and deliberate. It was clear that it was studying them, analyzing every single human in the room. There was no hostility in its approach, but the weight of its presence was undeniable. Hawk took a step forward, trying to make sense of what was happening. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice firm, though she couldn't quite hide the edge of uncertainty. The figure's voice echoed in their minds. "We are the custodians. The galaxy has watched you, watched all of you, and now you have drawn the attention of powers far beyond your understanding." Hawk's heart skipped a beat. Custodians. The word sent a shiver down her spine. This was not just another alien race. This was something older, something far more powerful than any force they had encountered before. "You have passed the first test, humans," the custodian continued, its voice now laced with a quiet but undeniable power. "But you will soon learn that the price of your victory is not paid in blood alone. There are those who have noticed your rise, and they are coming." Hawk felt the weight of its words. She knew the galaxy had many faces, some kind, others cruel. But this was different. She could feel the gravity of it. Before she could respond, the custodian turned, its long limbs moving like flowing shadows. "You will now face the true challenge. Only then will you understand the cost of your victory." The figure disappeared into the darkness, its words echoing like a distant warning. The ground continued to tremble, but this time, it wasn't the rumbling of the enemy. It was the preparation of something far greater. Hawk turned to her team, her voice steady despite the fear creeping into her thoughts. "Brace yourselves. This is only the beginning." The silence after the custodian's departure was deafening. The team stood still, their eyes locked on the darkened corridor where the figure had disappeared, a sense of unease spreading through them like an unstoppable tide. Hawk felt the weight of the moment press down on her chest. The custodians were no mere diplomats or soldiers. They were something ancient, a force that watched over the galaxy, observing and judging. They had seen humanity rise, and now humanity had earned their undivided attention. Hawk broke the silence. "What do you think they meant? What's the true challenge?" Dax, still nursing his wounds, met her gaze. His voice was low, almost reverent. "It means we've made an enemy of someone, or something, powerful enough to change everything. We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We've moved into something bigger, something far more dangerous." Hawk nodded. There was no denying it. The custodians didn't come to make threats lightly, and their message was clear. Humanity had earned their attention, and that attention would come at a cost. Suddenly, the sound of distant engines broke the tension. At first, it was barely a hum, faint and uncertain. But soon, it grew louder, closer. Dax tensed, his hand instinctively reaching for the sidearm at his waist. Turner's eyes darted to the control panels, his fingers dancing over the interface in an attempt to gain some insight into what was happening. "They're here," Turner said, his voice shaking. "But it's not just one ship. It's more. Lots more." Hawk's heart rate spiked. She knew what this meant. Whatever threat the custodians had warned them about, it was already here. And they had to face it. "Are the defenses ready?" she asked, turning to the team. Turner nodded grimly. "We've got weapons and shields, but we don't know what we're up against. These ships, these forces, they're not just random. They're organized, and they're coming straight for us. Then we need to make a stand," Hawk said, her voice calm but firm. "Get to your positions. Everyone, stay sharp. This isn't a drill." The team scrambled into position, their movements hurried but coordinated. Hawk felt the rush of adrenaline flood her veins. This was it, the moment when everything they had worked for would be tested. The moment when humanity would have to prove it wasn't just a passing player in the galaxy. They were more than that. They were survivors, fighters, and above all, they were united. The first of the enemy ships came into view, a massive dark silhouette against the backdrop of space. It loomed closer, its hull shimmering with a strange energy. It wasn't a typical warship. It was something else, something new. Hawk couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine as she watched it approach. "Those are no ordinary ships," Dax murmured. "Those are war machines, built for total destruction." "We'll handle them," Hawk said, though doubt lingered in the back of her mind. She wasn't sure how they could defeat something so powerful, but she knew one thing for certain. They had no choice but to try. The hum of the engines grew louder, now accompanied by the low, menacing rumble of the enemy's weapon systems powering up. The galaxy was about to learn just how deadly humanity could be when pushed to the brink. As the ships drew closer, the screens flared to life with warnings. flashing red as the enemy opened fire. Hawk's pulse quickened. The first wave of projectiles hit the station's shields, sending shockwaves through the structure. The entire room trembled with the force of the blast. "Shields are holding," Turner shouted, his voice strained. But Hawk knew the shields wouldn't hold forever. They were up against more firepower than she had ever imagined. And the custodian's words rang in her mind. "Only then will you understand the cost of your victory." The realization struck her like a lightning bolt. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a test to see if humanity was truly worthy of the power it had gained. She glanced over at her team. Dax, Turner, and the others were all focused, their eyes sharp and determined. They had no choice now but to fight. They were humanity's last line of defense, and the weight of that responsibility was heavy on their shoulders. But despite the odds, despite the overwhelming power of their enemies, Hawk couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone. There was something else in the air, a presence, almost. It was as if the custodians were watching, waiting to see if humanity would rise to the challenge. As the second wave of enemy ships entered firing range, Hawk knew one thing for sure. This would not be an easy victory, but it would be theirs. Humanity had proven itself once before, and now it would do so again. "Brace yourselves," she shouted. "We fight together, or we fall alone. This is our moment." The battle had begun.